Hello and welcome to our workshop, SVPD workshop on mentorship and leadership. Hello, my name is Prisma Garcia and I'm the Director of Capacity Building for Social Venture Partners Dallas. SVP Dallas amplifies impact to those that are out there doing good. And today we are having a discussion with some of our partners and organizations to discuss a little bit more about mentorship and leadership. Of course, we know that coronavirus has been a great reset in our society, in our work life, and our home life. And so we know that this is no different for mentorship and leadership. And so today, joining us, we have several of our SVP partners joining us. We have Julian Placino, who is an SVP partner and host of Pathways to Success podcast. We have Gwencles, she's the SVP partner as well, and retired senior management of Bank of America. We have Jon Mellenham, who is also a partner, and Damila Thomas, who is a senior vice president. She actually is with a nonprofit called Big Brothers, Big Sisters of Greater Dallas, and actually that is a SVP, previous SVP investee. And so today we will be discussing and having the opportunity to learn from these experts who will all introduce themselves individually, and we'll learn more about the demands of mentorship now during this time of COVID-19 within social impact organizations, but just in every industry. And so I'm going to turn it over to our first panelist, but first I wanted to thank Something Good Consulting Group and Right Knatzer for their support and social impact, and also our support of SVP Dallas. And if you're on social media today, you can post on any of the platforms using the hashtag SVPD Workshop. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our first panelist, and we're going to start off with Gwen.
Oh, thanks so much, Prisma. And I'm Gwencles. I'm a nonprofit board member and advisor, and I've been a partner with Social Venture Partners for 2 years. And I am so excited to be a part of this workshop today and feel especially lucky to be in the company of such a terrific panel. So I think we'll have a great conversation. I love this topic of mentoring and leadership, especially at this time, because it truly is about your life and your career and ensuring that any kind of work that you do is relevant and has purpose. And as Prisma mentioned, my professional background covers about 20 years in the corporate environment, most recently with Bank of America. But since 2004, I've worked exclusively in the community as a nonprofit volunteer. And in looking back at any point, going back to when I was with the bank, I was either being mentored in a leadership development program, acting as a mentor, or acting as a mentor out in the community. And that still pretty much applies to me right now as a community volunteer. Some of the mentoring programs that I work in include formal programs like the United Way's Social Innovation Accelerator. Some of my mentoring is very informal, working with high potential young people to develop their career. And then I'm personally continuing to seek out and learn from people. There's so many wise people in this community that can informally help me. So I never would have predicted how important the role of a mentor would be in both the corporate and nonprofit field. And regardless of the uncertainty that we're in right now, I'm here to encourage all of you to begin your journey or continue your efforts, because the payoff is incredible. So I look forward to this conversation today, and much appreciate it, Prisma.
Thank you. Thank you. And with that, we're going to turn it over to Jon Mellenham, and he is also a senior account executive at Life Investors Management Company. So Jon, go ahead and give an intro.
Thanks, Prisma, and thank you, everyone. I'm glad to be here today. My name is Jonathan Mellenham. As Prisma said, I am a senior account executive at Life Investment Management Company, which is an alternative investment firm. I am also the managing partner for Black Creek Consulting, which is a firm where we focus on capital raising for socially responsible investments. Prior to my current role, I was at Morgan Stanley for about 10 years. There I was a manager of the mutual fund sales desk, the ETF desk, and the 529 sales desk. And then More recently, about 5 years ago, I moved to Dallas and I took over sales for North Texas. And prior to that, I was in the United States Marine Corps, where I served for 4 years and also did a number of tours with the government, various government agencies. I've had a number of different mentoring experiences and being a mentor. So currently I serve in a capacity for American corporate partners, where we mentor transitioning military to go into the civilian world. And typically what they do is they'll partner people with roles that are similar to theirs and where their interest lies. And then we will facilitate a mentoring relationship for them. So I'm looking forward to today's conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, John. With that, we have Julian Placino, and he has several careers, but we'll let him introduce himself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Julian Placino. I am the host of the Pathways to Success podcast and the founder of the Pathways to Success training company, through which I do keynote speaking, group training, and private one-on-one coaching in terms of personal development and also personal branding. The reason why I am so passionate about this topic of mentorship, because I believe that acquiring a mentor is the fastest way to acquire a new skill and begin implementing and creating results immediately. Over the course of 3 years, I went from being a recruiter to being a sponsored podcaster, professionally represented actor and commercial model, a keynote speaker, and within 6 months of intentionality, I built a consulting company which replaced my income and set me on this path of full-time entrepreneurship, which I'm on today. And I credit largely being able to create these results by seeking the wise ones, people who have already done what it is that I'm trying to do. And that is why I'm so passionate about finding mentors.
Thank you, Julian. Jamila, you're up next.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be on this esteemed panel. So many wonderful individuals and so much vast experience. So again, my name is Damila Thomas. I serve as Senior Vice President for Big Brothers Big Sisters of Greater Dallas. Prior to this role, I was blessed to work in Dallas Independent School District, where I was responsible for racial equity. I served as the Director of Racial Equity, the Racial Equity Office there. So I believe that fundamentally to living and growing and being a human, it's critically important that we are connected to each other. There's no greater opportunity than to connect a heart with a heart than through the eyes and lens of a child, but more importantly, through the lens of recognizing that we all have gifts to bear, that we all have gifts to give. And so I'm honored to be on this panel. I'm looking forward to having the conversation, and I look forward to seeing what we all have to say. So thank you.
Thank you. And so how this typically works is that we have each panelist go into a deeper discussion from their perspective. We all bring different perspectives to the table, and there'll be some chance at the end for the audience to ask questions. And so the Q&A is open, and so you can start submitting questions as you hear our panelists give a deeper discussion. And of course, we want to remind you that feel free to post on social media, and then also once again thanking our sponsors. But with that, I'm gonna turn it over to this deeper discussion, because we know that leadership is really morphing, and I think Jamila, you said it nicely, right? People, right? The humanity that we are encountering, we see it in our daily work, and so we know that leadership is really morphing into something more open, collaborative, agile. And this is really, COVID-19 is a crisis, but we've had crisis in the past, right? So maybe it's different, but this is perhaps an opportunity to rethink how we lead and how we mentor one another. And so I know that everyone in the audience can really think through or think about like previous mentors they may have had, and maybe they didn't know they were mentors, but you see them as mentors. And so with that, we're gonna go into these panelist perspectives, and I'm gonna turn it over to Julian, who has experience in gaining just unlimited mentors, which, I didn't realize we could have so many, but Julian, we'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Prisma. So as far as finding unlimited mentors, I sort of have always been drawn to conversation and finding people who have already done what it is that I'm looking to do, because someone who's produced a particular result represents a methodology. They know a sort of a how-to. So it's always been sort of my MO to go find the people who've done this and go learn from them directly, right? So when I speak about mentorship in terms of acquisition, I talk about ask, pay, serve. Number one, ask. You'll be so surprised about what people have accomplished just by asking around, and be specific about the outcome. For example, when I started the podcast, I had no clue how to start a podcast, how to do the hosting, the recording, or anything like that. Immediately, I started reaching out to my network and asking, who do you know that has started a podcast? I was introduced to a gentleman by the name of Jason Croft. He was the host of Startup Dallas. And because I could see the work that he's created, I knew his results were verified. We became friends and he showed me step by step how to do the podcast. And from there sprung all these other abundant opportunities for me. In terms of pay, I've hired so many mentors, invested thousands of dollars in myself in terms of training and also private coaching. So don't be afraid to invest in yourself if you find somebody who you vibe with and would like to learn from directly. And lastly, serve. A lot of times mentors are really busy and they're time poor. So how do you go about earning that time? Everyone has a problem that they need to solve. How can you work for them for free? How can you solve that problem? In SVP specifically, when I first became introduced to this organization, truly, I was just looking for a way to apply my skills to create a social impact. But throughout that process, man, I met Tony Fleo, Powad Jaggi, Mark Sinatra, Stephen Rabb, all who became teachers and who were instrumental in helping me get to where I am today. Ask, pay, serve.
Wow, thank you so much, Julian. And with that, we're going to go to Jon next, which he shares a different perspective and perhaps, can share a little bit more about that servant leadership. And of course, we heard that he is a veteran. So thank you for your service, Jon.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. And thank you. So yeah, just in terms of my experience, I mean, I've had a lot of mentors throughout my career, and it's probably been the most beneficial thing that's ever happened, right? And I think going back to what you said, Prisma, is a lot of those mentors were informal mentors, right? I didn't know they were mentors at the time when I guess I acquired them as mentors, but throughout my career, it was very transparent that they were my mentors and people I met with on a monthly basis. And so as a mentor, or as a mentee, I should say, I actively sought out people in the organization that were high achievers, right? So I went to Morgan Stanley and I wanted to meet the managing directors who were really making it and making a difference, right? And they had that charisma and that passion and all those things, right? And so I never stopped asking the question, how did you get to where you are today, right? And when you ask people that question, they want to help you. They want to answer that question because, one, it's flattering to them, right? They're like, hey, that's cool. I did accomplish something, so I want to talk to you about it. And then they take the time and invest the time in you and your career. And what you get out of that are advocates, right? So you get brand advocates throughout the organization for you, right? And all this happened by chance, but the more I realized how important the mentorship relationships were for people throughout the organization, it was an incredible experience, and it advanced my career significantly in a much shorter time frame than I ever would have thought it would. And in terms of being a mentor, my experience has been throughout Morgan Stanley and even today, right? There are people that I mentor, and there's also formal mentor programs, which I mentioned before, American Corporate Partners, which is a formal mentorship program. But even in the corporate world, being a mentor has been a very rewarding relationship, right? Because it gives you the opportunity to give back to other people and also help push them in their career and see them achieve, right? So it's been a great experience.
Thank you, Jon. Gwen, I know that Gwen shared with us earlier that she's, mentoring organizations, she's mentored people, she's been a mentee, and I think in particular, we know that there are many nonprofit leaders on this call today, and so we want to acknowledge that, how do these organizations thrive during this time? And so, I'm gonna let Gwen answer that perhaps, and then tell us a little bit more about her perspective.
Yeah, I think, Prisma, going back to some of the earlier days in the corporate environment, the energy and the time that I put in years ago, combined with the investment that the company made in me to develop me through these programs, it continues to pay off to this day in the community. And it created a really strong foundation to build upon. And, just an example going back, I had the chance to participate in the bank's inaugural women's mentoring program. And it was backed by the chairman of the company. The executive mentors themselves were invested in seeing us all succeed. And that to me is an excellent recipe for participation in any kind of program. The top down has to support the effort. And some of the biggest takeaways that that helped build my foundation, including being around mentors that set the gold standard for modeling executive traits. Being approachable, but modeling the behavior was really one of the most powerful things that I experienced. We also had formal training and leadership practice around empowering teams. And at the bank, that was so important, as in the nonprofit world too, because nothing at the company and business nor in nonprofit can get done without a team effort. And, to expand upon that, some of that foundation also included, instilling a commitment to excellence with the people that you work with, ensuring that the people on your team feel valued, being approachable when there are customer problems, when there's a problem with a grant, ensuring that your team knows that you can solve the problems together, you'll back them, and that they can always come to you for a resolution. And then ultimately, again, in business and in nonprofit, whether it's a sales win or a big grant win, the win is shared by all. And deflecting, I've seen such great modeling with executives deflecting the praise to the entire team. So, all of these components I think are more important than ever, especially in the nonprofit environment. And the pandemic has really further accelerated the need for all of us to be up on our game. So, I asked the audience, think about your foundation and what is your foundation? And do you need to build upon it? Do you need to share it with others? Where exactly are you right now on the coaching and the mentoring continuum? And if you're employed and you're new to the mentorship game, make it a priority to find out what your company has to offer. Make an effort to see what's out there in the Dallas community. Programs like Leadership Dallas are so awesome and so worth it, and expose you to so many people. There are so many in this environment, so many types of e-mentoring. I noticed that Fortune company that does Fortune magazine, they just came out with an e-mentoring membership program for junior level employees to begin to work on developing their skill set outside of their own office environment. So you don't need, with all of that said, you don't need a formal program to be mentored. And I encourage everybody, and Julian referenced this, to really take a look around you. And who are the people that you admire and respect that you work with in the community or in business? Is there a way that you can work with them in some way? Can you be on a committee? Can you take on an assignment that interacts with them and sees them in action? And this has been my #1 way to create informal mentoring connections in the nonprofit environment. There is nothing wrong with genuinely letting people know, hey, I admire your work, your knowledge of the community. If there's an opportunity to sit in a meeting or work on your committee, I'd be grateful for the chance. I promise that I'll be a solid contributor if you call on me. And then, of course, when you get called on, you don't ever say no. And this has led to some great opportunities. So if you wish to be a mentor, kind of turning the tables, this is especially a good time to offer yourself as a resource. And look for volunteer opportunities where you can consult and build your mentoring muscle. And, I'll say a plug for social venture partners. They're a great place to consult. At one point after I left the bank, I took classes and I got certified by the Center for Nonprofit Management and as a consultant. And I went right out there in the community and I started evaluating boards. And, there's nothing like doing an evaluation and sitting in front of a board of directors and giving them not necessarily good information about the health of their organization. But it was excellent experience, and it was a great way to practice my coaching skills. So Prisma, I can keep going on some other experiences. I want to leave time for everybody else to comment and ask questions.
Yeah, well, we'll turn it over to Jamila, but I know that we'll be coming back to some of that great information, because it's so important for our organizations to hear about your role as a volunteer within, you know, evaluating these boards or helping build the capacity of organizations. So Jamila, we're gonna turn it over to you and hear more about Big Brothers Big Sisters. I know that you're a mentoring organization, and you can tell us a little bit more about that, and you know, also just how your staff has been adjusting.
And thank you so much for the opportunity. So yes, Big Brother Big Sisters has been in existence for approximately 100 years or more, and about 95 of those years actually here in Dallas. And so we've actually evolved over time to ensure that we're meeting the need of the communities that we're serving. So currently we have 4 distinct programs, and that's our community-based program, which is the traditional program that you're used to seeing, perhaps young people and their mentors, bigs and littles, that is, out in the community, whether they're you know, playing ball or reading books or at the parks or going to the movies together, really developing an organic relationship. And I think that's key from a mentoring perspective, that being organic and being who you are and authentic in that relationship is so important, because that's how you build value. The second program is our site-based program, which encompasses 2 very distinct ways of engaging. That's through our site-based program, where young people are being able to engage with their bigs at their school location. And that's the extent of their relationship. It doesn't extend up beyond that. They have to be matched, we call it matched, for at least a year before they actually can extend the relationship outside of the school walls. But essentially, for that site-based program, a big comes to a young person's school, and they're having conversations. We like to call them lunch and learns. In the corporate world, I know that's what we call them, lunch and learns, where they're spending about an hour with that student, whether it's during school, during the lunch hour, or actually after school. That's about 2 times, 3 times a month. Then the secondary program, with respect to it being actually our Mentor 2.0 program, and that's for our high school students. And so those bigs and littles, they communicate via an online platform. So they're texting and having conversations that are specific to a particular content around career development, goals, aspirations that they have in life. And so, as you can imagine, that conversation is very fluid, because young people have a lot of questions, right? And sometimes adults, we think we have the answers. We don't have all the answers, but we definitely can provide insight based on our experiences. And then lastly, we have our Beyond School Walls, which is a really, really creative way of us bringing mentoring to a corporation. So I know Gwen and Julian and Jon also talked about the importance of having mentorship in a corporation. Well, imagine this. Imagine a number of young people, let's say about 25, that are coming to a corporation or industry, depending on the industry it is, and they're meeting with their big or mentor for about an hour at their location. So a young person that's going to a law firm, and we have all these beautiful stories about how young people have gotten a chance to visit with their mentor or their big at their location, specifically the law firms downtown. They have a tendency to like those because they're going up in these huge buildings, you know. And so for us, we take elevators all the time. We go up and, get off the elevator. But when you see through the lens of a child, when you're going up that elevator in downtown Dallas and you're looking out the glass and you finally get to the 50th floor, it's like, what? So the children just run towards the windows because they're so excited about what they see. And I believe that is a metaphor for what mentorship does for you. It takes you to the top of the world. It gets you to places that perhaps you couldn't get on your own, and I think that's the value of mentoring a young person, that they can see your gifts in a way that's fundamental to their growth and development. They can see through your experiences and through your lens the opportunity to go places that perhaps their experiences in life would preclude them from doing so. I like to say that we have truly mastered this idea of creating social capital, right, through a human lens, that if I'm connected to you, perhaps you not only are my mentor, you turn into a sponsor, because you get to know who I am. So it's no longer this sort of, dynamic of you giving, and I'm kind of just taking, but now it's, no, I'm giving back to you because I know who you are. I'm just going to use an example as a person's name. Let's say you, Prisma, right? Now as a teenage young person, right? You're connected to someone who can lead you to places that perhaps you haven't been able to go to, or you haven't been able to see, you haven't had that particular example. And so now that you've sort of been with this person over a number of years and getting to know them, and perhaps even obtaining an internship because of how wonderful you are, how wonderful the mentor have seen you turn into this a beautiful, amazing person, they say, hey, I think Prisma could fit this internship opportunity. Let's pull her in. So now a sponsorship relationship has been created because now your name has been spoken in rooms that you're not even in. So now that turns into leadership. So now you have a responsibility as a young person that's now matriculated into this wonderful human being and gone through life to now reach back to those individuals that you were either in school with or that you now are mentoring yourself to build one, teach one, reach one. And I think that's the beauty of mentorship, that it can turn into something, it evolves into something that's greater than just the standard way of saying, hey, I want to share some knowledge with you. But now it's a cohesive relationship where we're sharing with one another. So those 4 programs have allowed us to be successful for a number of years. And I'm obviously biased, but I think no other organization does it better than us, connecting hearts with hearts. And quite frankly, as we live in this world of racial injustice and how we're all being exposed to a lot of things that some of us have, been exposed to perhaps for our life, for the extent of our lives, but being exposed to things historically that we just would have not have had the opportunity to engage. Well, to have these conversations now on a more fluid basis, because now we're virtual, these things are right in our face. One of the things that we do is that we connect people. We don't really care what your background is necessarily as it relates to culture, because we believe that connecting hearts with hearts, people with people, humans with humans, is the beauty and the value of the American experience. And that if I can value who you are as an individual, the dynamic person that you are, whatever culture you deem yourself to be, that we've created this symbolic sort of stance on what it means to be human. And I think that's what mentorship does for all of us. It creates a sponsorship sort of vein that leads into a leadership opportunity. And that's what we hope to do ongoing with Big Brothers Big Sisters. I can talk about a whole host of other things that we do, from our Amachi program, which is for young people who have incarcerated parents, which is a social justice initiative, right? Our LGBTQIA focus, which is making sure that young people that identify in a particular way have access to resources and people that can hone in with them, right, and walk with them. Again, just we believe that if we can connect people with people, then we've done this world a great justice, and that opens up the door for a lot of different conversations. So obviously I can go on and on, as Gwen's mentioned as well, but I'm just thankful that I'm able to share that with you all. And I hope from this conversation that people begin to look at Big Brothers Big Sisters as the nonprofit to come to when you want to mentor. We create safety. That's key. We have to have safety. I think we're the best at doing that.
Thank you, Jamila. I know that, I'm happy that I'm not a teenager, though. That's one part I don't want to take part in again.
No.
but I will. Yeah, but I will say, a lot of what you've said resonated, and I know that the audience is starting to submit questions, and I want to get to our questions and, take the audience questions live as well. But, just from what we've heard from everyone, Julian, Jon, Jamila, Gwen, all of you, you share different aspects of mentorship and how that is leadership or can lead to leadership positions, and how we can all be, essentially what I've gained is that we can all be mentors, and we can all be mentored, right, by someone else. And it just having the example of Big Brothers Big Sisters is that sometimes we view it as well when you were a child, right? You can be mentored, or maybe your parents were your mentors, but this is something that is particularly important during this crisis, right? During this pandemic, we start to recognize that we're all human, because we're all having to be more authentic and people, allowing people to come in, right? And so with that, I want to, just turn it over to some questions. I know that, maybe there are some differences, or maybe there are none, right? Maybe this is the chance that we have to seek mentors or mentor others. I think sometimes, and I think about it in my perspective, well, I think people are so busy. How can I ask someone to do something else, right? How can I approach someone and say, I need help with this? And, and maybe that's just what we think, but maybe not reality. And so I'm going to turn it over to Julian. Julian, I know that you've had a lot of experience with mentors. And so I don't know if you could point out any key differences or maybe, new challenges or maybe new opportunities during this pandemic.
I think what was mentioned was like, how do you ask, right? Because a lot of people have sort of apprehension towards finding a mentor. And honestly, whenever I coach other people to find mentors, I typically have them stay away from using the word track, can you be my mentor? That is an overwhelming prospect for that individual who already has so much on their plate. And that is why I try to be very clear and specific based on outcomes. You are much more likely to get a conversation with someone if you're talking about a particular thing. I would like to learn about your experience doing this, right? 15, 30 minutes. From that conversation, if you are prepared and genuinely interested in that individual and that subject matter, a relationship will begin to form. And from there, that is how you earn their time.
Wow, thank you. Thank you, Julian. I guess, when you put it that way, we're not asking for necessarily a set amount of time. It could be a specific ask. And so I guess from the nonprofit perspective, mentoring perspective, I know that mentoring organizations, Jamila, have struggled or maybe have had to adopt new ways of doing this, but how has that process been for you? Have you found that more people are stepping up to the plate and saying, hey, I want a mentor, or what does that look like in a mentoring organization?
Yeah, no, thank you for that question. I think it's something that we've all grappled with. How do we do what we normally do in a different type of world? And for us, many of our mentoring programs have gone virtual, right? So I talked about the Mentor 2.0, which was typically virtual, and then we would meet one time a month with our young person and break bread together at the school. But now we're meeting online with all of our programs. Some of our community-based programs and individuals matches, if they feel comfortable, if they have that conversation with the family and the big and the little, and they feel that it's comfortable for them to meet, obviously wearing their mask and abiding by particular rules, then they can. Not too many places you can go, but we're living in this world. But one of the things that we've tried to be creative in this space is that a lot of our matches have taken virtual field trips. I mean, they're going to Paris and all kind of fun places, right? Because they're in this virtual world. In addition to that, using technology as best as possible while recognizing that some of our young people may not have access, that's a privilege to have access to, technology, and that has really taught us a lot as an organization. Like, how can we help to facilitate opportunities if we have corporate partners that are willing to donate, whether it be technology, the devices, what have you. And so that's opened up new doors for us than perhaps we hadn't thought about in the past. And I think for our corporate partners as well. So many of our young people not only are doing FaceTime, Fridays, but they're also engaging via Zoom, right? I am a Mentor 2.0 big. And so my mentee, we had a great conversation last week around what's going on in the world. And so now we gave each other assignments. I have to go watch a movie, and there's a book that we both were talking about that she has to go read. So anyway, my point is, it's a wonderful way to continue to engage. Everyone is trying to be as creative as possible. From a fundraising standpoint, obviously we've shifted a little bit. We normally have a number of events where we're inviting people to, learn about our mission and come out and enjoy. Well, that shifted. Now our gala, which we normally, it's a huge event, but 1,000 people and a toll, big deal. Now it's all virtual, right? And we're trying to shift and pivot and be as creative as possible. I can say that I feel confident with how we have shifted. Would we want it to go back to how it was normally? Perhaps, because we all miss the human contact, but we're in the world we're in. And so we've had to pivot fundamentally. And so we've, asked our corporate partners, obviously, to continue to support us as best as possible, while recognizing we're doing everything that we can to make sure that our matches are solidified, they're cohesive, they're coherent, and they're working relative to the world we're living in. And that's important to us.
Yeah, that's great. I know I know that we've addressed some of those challenges with fundraising in the past, and I know that, they continue to come up. But one of the key things that I heard you talk about, Jamila, was the, that you receive some assignments from your mentee, I guess, right? And so in some ways it's, you're learning from your mentee. And so I'm gonna switch gears and think about reverse mentoring, because I know that with this digital age, I know that perhaps reverse mentoring is important to understand. And I know that sometimes we think of this mentor, and maybe it is because we're thinking about it as when we were children, it is going to be older, it's going to be more experienced, but that's not always the case. So I'm going to ask Gwen to talk a little bit more about reverse mentoring, what it is and how can we break some of those norms. But because what we keep seeing maybe is that manager is going to mentor the employee, or something to that effect. And so Gwen, can you talk more about reverse mentoring?
Yeah, sure. And happy if there's time to make some additional comments about nonprofit. But, by definition, reverse mentoring is essentially pairing a younger employee with an executive team member. And it started back in the 90s at GE with Jack Welch, when he had these established executives that knew nothing about technology, and he wanted to rapidly get them up to speed. And that's kind of the old school. And I experienced that back in the 90s at the bank. I was lucky to have some senior managers that wanted my opinion as a junior employee. And, for example, we had a sales program that we were going to implement, and they asked me to go to the sales company and go spend a week on site and review the program and really be able to give feedback to executive management as to whether it really fed into the strategy of the company. And so those opportunities they're ongoing now. And I think as far as the mentoring model is concerned, you can never be too old or too young to be mentored. And the generational divide that existed 25, 30 years ago, it is so far gone. And part of that is because of technology and acceleration of learning. And I think it's really leveled the playing field. The younger employees, junior employees are much more with it and can see their future in a much stronger fashion than I think my generation. In the social impact and nonprofit space, many of us that are senior level business people, we already work and interact with individuals of a younger generation who they see and they experience things in social impact so much more clearly. And so if you're not already part of a multi-generational work group, mentoring group, you're letting a really good opportunity pass you by. And there is such great evidence in Dallas of this already working so well. A nod to social venture partners. You're doing such a great job. But, doing some work with the Dallas Dallas Office of Arts and Culture, I think I've got it right. Jennifer Scripps and her team, she has some of the most smartest, strategic, young junior employees on her team that I wouldn't hesitate. For example, an Anne-Marie Gans. I wouldn't hesitate to ask Anne-Marie for advice on things in the field of arts and culture, relationships, strategy. So really, I think the bottom line is, if you're not working with a multi-generational group, you should be, and you should be seeking it out. And it's all really comes down to relevancy. So, and don't be afraid and don't feel awkward to take advice from some of your junior team members.
Thank you, Gwen. And I know that, we've seen that be the case also within our partners, our partnership, and also our Dana Druid residents, right? How, really we can have this, relationship and mentor one another. And so, Jon, I want to go back to you. I know that you come with a diverse experience, bringing, being in the military, transitioning to civilian life and corporate life, that is. So how is the corporate environment approaching leadership and mentorship during this time?
Well, so I think from the perspective of just leadership and mentorship in general, right, communication is key. And so in a time like right now where people aren't front and center in the office, right, reaching out to your employees as a leader on a frequent basis and checking in and seeing how they're doing is front and center of importance. And I think when you talk about a mentor-mentee relationship, personal opinion is I think this is a great opportunity to reach out to people, right? I mean, when I came to SVP, which was in February of this year, right? We then all of a sudden, right, we had a pandemic and you couldn't meet people in person. So I picked up the phone and I called everybody, right? So I just tried to call around the organization and meet the partners. And you know what was great about that is I got an hour of people's undivided attention, right? And got to learn about them in a setting where, quite frankly, I don't think it would have happened otherwise. So right now, people actually have a little bit more downtime, right? At least that's my observation from talking to people. They're not commuting to work and going back and forth. They're not going to meetings after work or meeting with clients or any of that, right? So you have an opportunity to get someone's undivided attention, and now is a great time to reach out to someone in your organization that you want to learn more about, or a subject that you want to learn more about, and reach out to that subject matter expert or reach out to that leader and say, hey, you know, I was wondering if you could take some time and walk me through this. I'd love to learn more about you and you know, how you got to where you are today, right? And then the conversation starts. And I think it goes back to what Julian said is it comes down to you reach out to them with an intent, right? And then you fill out that first interaction and then it progresses forward. And if people want to be a mentor and if they want to actually, you know, basically educate you and help bring you up in a business and they really care, they're gonna find that you're trying to do something out of sincerity and you're trying to become better, and they're gonna want to take the time and spend it with you, right? And so I think that there definitely are opportunities. And then there's also formal processes, right? So I mean, if you look at a company or a program like American Corporate Partners, right, their whole goal is to basically partner people that are transitioning in the military. Some of them are still in the military, right, with corporate leaders, and they want to get them in front of them in a field that they are interested in. And then you'll have that relationship, and it's a great opportunity because what you can do is when you're talking to the people that you're mentoring, right, you have the opportunity to feel them out, understand where they're trying to go in their career, and then pass them along to other people in your organization or maybe in your network that they can talk to, right? So there's an easy way to facilitate mentoring and leadership during this time. It's just a matter of communicating and getting in front of people.
Yeah, thank you for that, John. I think I want to talk a little bit about the messaging, because I find that as I expressed my own concerns, like how would this person have time for Prisma, who's asking this one question, right, or wants to know this process. And so Julian, how can, you know, mentors or mentees really, you know, uniquely and compellingly present their message?
Yeah, so I think it helps to sort of lay the foundation of when I say the word mentor, I don't refer to a particular demographic or an age. It's very outcome focused. Therefore, I've had mentors who are younger, who are my age, who are older. All I care about is what they've done and how is that relevant to my own learning, right? So where I have succeeded in acquiring mentors is being very specific about what is it that I'm trying to achieve. Also, so that's specificity, clarity, and also sincerity. And, you know, one thing that I've heard somebody once say that meant so much to me, which was, in order to be interesting, you must be interested. Because if you're taking the time to push past your fear and reach out to someone for help, you're generally really excited about that, right? So be very specific about the ask and show your true enthusiasm. It also helps to sort of build a case of what you have already done, right? So I think between those three things, that'll help the messaging: clarity, specificity, and enthusiasm.
Thank you, Julian. In terms of, you mentioned you've had all kinds of mentors. You know, it's not necessarily age, male, female, and so I'm gonna jump in and ask, you know, in particular, Jon and Gwen, I know that in the corporate environment, we've seen some tension previously due to the #MeToo movement, right? And how potentially some male professionals were, you know, became more self-aware, maybe didn't want to mentor women or seek women mentors. And so how can organizations encourage gender mentoring, in particular during this time where, everyone might be in their home life, and it's kind of blending. So Gwen and Jon, I don't know if you want to jump in.
Sure. Yeah, I can, speak to that to a degree. So I think there's two elements, right? I mean, one is a formal mentor process, right? And I truly believe that a formal mentor process should be a volunteer process, right? So people who want to be and are willing to learn and also want to give their time, right? That should be a part of it, right? So in that scenario, you're facilitating maybe an anonymous partnership or whatever the case is, but you don't necessarily have to know the gender of the other person. It's just relevant that you're getting somebody who's a subject matter expert in what you're interested in, or a leader in your organization, right? And then on the flip side of that, I think from a leader's perspective, right, you have to think about, am I serving people correctly? Am I treating everyone fairly? And the truth is this, is if you're as an example, when I used to run the sales desks in New York, we had both males and females, right? And here's how, I approached it. If I went golfing one day, not everyone would want to go golfing, right? So the next time around, when there was an activity that came up where we could attend, right, I made it specific to those other people, or I would make sure that I took everyone to lunch, right, individually, and spent time with them on an individual basis. And so, the truth is, if you're running an organization, if you're running a team, whatever the case is, if you're not spending an equal amount of time with everyone on that team, then you're not giving everyone a fair opportunity to be successful, and you're failing as a leader in that scenario. So I truly think that it's about treating people fairly and approaching it with a servant leader mentality.
Gwen, anything you would like to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think those really great comments, and it's a great question, and it's a really complex question. And I think even before the Me Too movement, the topic of gender and mentorship in the workplaces has had its share of controversy. And even, the gender-based mentoring that I went through at the bank with women's mentoring, I mean, even that had its share of controversy, that the thinking was that only gentlemen could give leadership and set skills and set examples, not women. So there's a lot in that history. And I think, practically every business journal has reported the stats, and they continue to rise, about the number of male managers that feel uncomfortable mentoring women. And, personally, I've always come from a belief that a great mentor-mentee relationship, it can vary not only by gender, but age, race, career stage, and type of work field. And so I think as a leader, you have to ensure that your culture has top-down support. And if it doesn't, it's a recipe for disaster. You cannot opt out of leadership development at your organization, nonprofit or for-profit. If you're leading a team, regardless of whether you have a formal program, you've got to put in place the environment where employees can feel safe to talk about these types of complexities and concerns. And you must set an example every day that you and your organization are interested in helping advance the skills of both men and women. And if you use that recipe, you will ensure that these opportunities can take place in your organization, and you'll retain your employees, and your employees will feel satisfied.
Thank you, Gwen. That's very interesting insight. And I know that when we're discussing, these, potential mentorships or opportunities, we have to think about, well, who do we have in our network? So, how do you tap into your network that you might already have? Julian, if you can maybe address, like, how do you tap into this network, or maybe you go seek someone who you don't know, with confidence and being authentic, because you said, go in with an ask, right? I'm not necessarily saying this is going to go on and on, but how does that translate to being authentic, in particular in a time where we all want to be authentic, and we're sharing so much about ourselves?
Yeah, I think, and I'm going back to my recruiting background here. I believe that acquiring a mentor, if you're being very intentional about it, it's about planning and also execution. So there are these recruiting wizard numbers that sort of happen organically throughout like a sales process, 27, 3, and 1. So for example, if I have absolute clarity of who it is that I'm trying to attract, I'll create a list of 20 people, whether it is people that I know, people that I know on LinkedIn, who am I associated with, but I start creating a list, right? And you reach out to all of them. Chances are maybe 7 will respond. You'll have a conversation with 3 and maybe connect with 1. So I look at it in a very systematic process. Now about how to craft that messaging, I think what I mentioned earlier, be very specific on the focus and also an ask. And don't ask for so much time. Typically 30 minutes is enough to learn from that individual, decipher compatibility, and create trust, which allows a space for more time with that individual moving forward.
Wow. Jamila, I want to ask, I know that you're finding mentors for the littles all the time in your organization, and then also just previously with your racial equity work. If you could share a little bit more about how you weave, all that social justice into these mentoring relationships, and just how that's proven to work at your organization.
Yeah, I think at this particular juncture, we all are trying to make sure that we're doing it the right way. And it's really about, I think, relationship. Once you have those relationships, it opens the door for conversations that may be difficult to be had, right? And so we have a number of young people that are matched with individuals that perhaps are not from their same cultural background. And so as we've seen what is happening in the world with respect to social justice and racial justice, we want to make sure as an organization we're providing resources that allow for our littles and bigs to have conscientious conversations that are not harmful but helpful. And so we have to be, very specific about the content that perhaps we can provide. When we look at the demographics of our organization and who makes up our bigs versus who makes up our littles, we definitely see the demographic difference. That does not mean it's right or wrong. That just means that there's a difference, right? That perhaps 90% of our bigs are of a particular culture that's particularly Caucasian, and the about 90% of our littles are African American, Latinx, and so forth, and Asian Pacific Islander, and so it runs Native American. It runs the gamut. And so what we know to be fundamentally the case is that when we match a caring adult with a young child, it can be a wonderful relationship. As relates to a recruitment standpoint, we're constantly opening our doors to say, hey, we need more volunteers. We have what's called the infamous wait list. So we have about 500 young people that are waiting for a mentor. And so we're actively recruiting organizations and nonprofits and opportunities to engage places that perhaps we say we serve in, but need to have a presence in. There is a difference. And I think many times organizations are serving in certain communities, but not present. And that's mind, body, and soul, and physicality. So we are doing our best to make sure that we're serving and having a presence in those places that perhaps have been ignored for a number of reasons. And so for us, we know that if we can identify organizations, whether they're nonprofit or corporate partners, that say, hey, we raise our hand, we want to be a part of your mission, and that we've opened up a door to create safe spaces for engagement and to have those conversations that we know are sometimes difficult to have. But as we move into our diversity, equity, inclusion work, and to be frank, we haven't had that particular space or an identification for that. We have now named that, where we have a team across the state of Texas that are working together to make sure that we're providing resources to one another, as well as building out policy and frameworks to ensure that our bigs and littles, when they do officially come back together, that when they begin having these conversations, that they have all the resources that we can give to them to ensure that they have effective conversations, because we know it can be difficult.
Yeah, definitely. And I know that, with that, so much of what you said reminds me of the well-being of us as people. And so, Julian, I know you've been a recruiter. You've talked about getting these unlimited mentors, and we're all taking notes. And so I just think back, and so much of what Jamila's mentioned in terms of, the little and the big, it reminds me of the well-being of people. And so how, during this pandemic, we become more aware of professionals as people. And so how can this well-being or become a priority, a strategic priority within our businesses, our nonprofits?
I want to answer it correctly, and I'm not sure if I understand the question. How does the well-being piece relate to the mentorship conversation?
And in terms of the strategic direction of teams, of the organizations, because I think we're viewing mentorship very broadly in the sense that it could be external or internal.
Yeah, I think this may be sort of an obvious thing, but a level of empathy and also communication. Like when I oversaw talent acquisition for Bottle Rocket, I worked very closely with the leadership team, all who had many, many direct reports. One of the most effective things that we did were these weekly one-on-ones, not just to talk about business, but to see how the human being was doing. So typically we have a very sort of elaborate 360 review process, which also outlines what are their goals, what are their aspirations, and understanding what their motivations are, and making sure what's happening within the workplace is in alignment with that. Because what I've seen causes attrition is when those pieces are not in alignment, right? So when it comes to hiring and finding the right match for any organization, there's 7 variables: motivation, skills, location, opportunity, money, availability, and culture. If one of those elements are not in alignment, there might be a chance that individual could be a flight risk. So understand the individual, what are their goals, and check in with them to see if things are still in alignment.
Thank you for that, Julian. That's very insightful. I know that at SVP Dallas, we've focused our leader, Tony Flo, we've done the Strength Finders assessment, as most of you know, and we also use that within our Dana Jewett residency. And so it's been a large part of having these intentional and deliberate conversations, one-on-ones, and we find that sometimes that doesn't always happen within the corporate setting, but it's good to hear that some people are doing that. So Jon, I'm gonna pass it on to Jon, because I know he's had diverse experience within the corporate sector, and how are leaders within maybe your own organizations and teams seeking out these opportunities to connect? I don't know if it's one-on-one, but in particular in the frame of the well-being, right? Because if your people are not well, then maybe the team isn't well.
Yeah, so I think it goes back to what I said before, and Julian, to the same point that you made, right? I think it comes down to those one-on-one conversations, and it's essential to have those with your immediate team and the rest of the organization, create the culture of that, right? So I think no matter how high up you are, when you take the time to have one-on-one with the people that are working underneath you, right? They're going to take the time to meet one-on-one with the people that are working underneath them. And then you create an organization where everyone's checking in with each other. And that's essential, I think, for well-being, because you have to understand, just like Julian said, what are their motivators? What are the drivers? What might be happening, or where are they struggling, right? And if you understand all those elements, then you have the opportunity to sit there, and there's a coaching opportunity, or maybe there's an opportunity to recommend a mentor, right? If they say, hey, I want to focus on this, right? Pair them with that person. And I think that's essential as a leader, right? You want the people in your team to be successful, and you want to have them move on beyond where they are today, right? So it's absolutely essential to check in with them, understand where they are, and then help them move along.
Thank you, Jon. And I know that the audience has been submitting questions, and we have them piling up for us, but we're going to start addressing a lot more of those. And I know that it seems like people want to know what you mean by pay, Julian. I know you mentioned you've spent a lot of money. Perhaps not everyone on the call, has that ability, or so maybe if you could talk a little bit more about pay, right? Because you've also mentioned that relationship component.
Yeah, so before you start thinking about who you want to pay to acquire mentorship, first look at the tools available to you. YouTube, unlimited university and mentors, right? You're not going to be able to have like a one-on-one relationship, but you can learn the nuggets. Now, in terms of paying, if you're very serious about working with a particular individual or taking a specific class because you know that you can achieve results as a result of it, find a way to get the money. I remember my first real estate class, it was $7,000. And I was like, I'm never going to be able to pay for this, right? But I had such a sincere desire to do it here at this time. I just put it on a credit card, right? But 3 weeks later, I did my first real estate deal. And then I started doing mobile homes and single families and acquiring rental property, right? Because I knew, right? What do they say? They say, would you worry about the price of a shovel if you knew there was a gold mine at the end of the tunnel? Right? But that's where you need to do your due diligence to make sure that this mentor or this training program is right for you. Still can't do that? Find a sponsor, right? So like what I do with my show, right? I create value because I get eyeballs to it. But what do? I get my corporate sponsors to pay for the show. Sponsorship, right? YouTube, figure out your free tools first. Number 2, if you don't have the money, borrow it. Find a way to get it. Number 3, try to find sponsorship opportunities. Between those 3, I think you'll be on the right path.
Thank you, Julian. And this next question, anyone feel free to jump in. I know that so many of our organizations, in particular nonprofits, we didn't get a lot of warning, right? And now maybe there's been some adjustments, but the audience is asking, as a social impact organization or not, specifically maybe a nonprofit or a project that is working out in the community, how can you meet? How can you establish these new professional relationships? And I know that's pretty broad. I don't know if they mean technology, but maybe if you could share some tips, any of you that are on the call. And I know, Gwen, you particularly might have some feedback in this area.
Yeah, I think, sometimes it takes a lot of courage. And there was a point where I had a chance to mentor a DISD principal through the Chamber's education program. And I went ahead and did it, but I was younger than the principal I mentored. Turned out I was more junior than the other executive mentors. And these executive mentors in this cohort were very heavy hitters. So it was intimidating. People like Bob Ferguson, who was the managing director of TD Industries, Shauna Sowell from TI. And I took the leap, I got asked, took the leap, and I ended up being kind of a mentor and a mentee at the same time. And ultimately, the big surprise was that I actually had plenty to contribute. And the resulting access and exposure to high-level thinkers was fabulous. And so I took that opportunity and it took every full advantage of it. And by that I mean, I humbly asked Bob Ferguson to, could I come to his company and take part in some of his servant leadership courses? He said yes. So, I took a week off from work at the bank and I sat in with his team and I learned everything I could about servant leadership. That was some of my vacation time. So that was how I paid. Shauna Sowell, I asked her to support me for Leadership Dallas. I got a great recommendation from her and it helped me into that program, which led to other connections. And then the access to better understanding public education. That's been just a godsend as I've volunteered my time with other boards, now having a little bit of understanding how public education works. So, one opportunity can lead to a gold mine, but you must have courage to give it a try. And sometimes I could easily tell you things that didn't work out. Sometimes they don't all work out. But to have the courage and don't sell yourself short, you'd be amazed at what you can contribute and where it can lead you.
Thank you, Gwen. I don't know if anyone else wants to add something. I know that maybe I'll take a whole week off and I'll go find that mentor or that experience. Gwen is saying yes. So Tony, if you're watching, that's what's up to come. But anyways, I wanted to go back to, and we know that leaders don't necessarily always have that manager position. And so I know that Jon in particular, sorry about that. I know that Jon in particular, you know, he mentioned managers and the workplace. And so, Jon, I don't know if you could share with us a little bit more about your advice to those that are managing teams, you know, and say that your manager isn't on board with you going outside of your organization and finding these mentors. So if you could share a little bit more about that.
So, I mean, if it's, I guess to answer your question, internally, right, I think it's incredibly important that everyone have mentors. And so there's a couple of things that I would say about that is, one, when you're seeking a mentor, right, I think a lot of people don't reach high enough. And so part of the problem is with some mentor-mentee relationships is a lot of people just seek one level up, right? And when you seek one level up, you get a lot of feedback and a lot of comments on your current role. How can you do better in your current position? How can you, you know, improve on processes, things like that. But that's more of a role of a manager. And I think where I found the biggest benefit in my organization is when I reached out to people that were the head of departments in other areas. And maybe not, they didn't know about my position, right? Because it wasn't their job too. And maybe they never had that position. But what I learned from them was a completely different skill set. I learned how they came up in the business. I learned how they became leaders of the organization. What was their story? You know, what attributed to their steps along the way to be successful, right? And I think the one comment that was more transparent than anything were two things: build your brand, and then two was constantly seek out more mentors, right? So it was, you can learn from everyone in your organization. The more you know, the more you're going to be a go-to person. And I think when you're a leader of an organization and when you're managing a team, it's absolutely essential. If someone is showing interest on moving on in their career, they're trying to find the next step, you have to partner them with a mentor or guide them in the right direction, right? Say, hey, you might want to go talk to this person, or this would be a good person to reach out to, right? That is, they have to be guided. And I think as a leader, it's essential that you do that.
Thank you, Jon. And with that, you know, I know, Jamila, you're in the nonprofit now. You're a mentoring organization, and so I'm curious, you know, what kinds of things your organization has done to create that mentorship space internally, because I know that's what you do in the community. But what are you doing internally, in particular during this COVID-19 pandemic?
Yeah, we encourage people to identify someone who inspires you. Not only personally, but also professionally. If you aspire to be in a particular role, we encourage you to seek that person out. And we are a small organization as it relates to the number of people, right? So that creates a bit of more of camaraderie than it would be if we were 500 strong in an organization. And so we have to be extremely calculated in making sure that those individuals that, from a hierarchy standpoint, the executives are also building relationships with those individuals who are looking to aspire to be in those roles. And so I think that's important, finding people that inspire you. And that goes both ways. Those individuals that are in roles, even for me, we have wonderful match support specialists in our organization. And those are the individuals that are responsible for really making sure that our matches are cohesive. These are degreed individuals, social workers for the most part, that are making sure that their caseload of approximately 100 to 120 matches are flowing very well. So I have a lot to learn from them. I've been with this organization for about a year and a couple of months. And so my goal is to seek them out for advice, to make sure that when I'm speaking in the community, that I'm able to speak fluidly about the mission of our organization, not just because I need that information, but more importantly, because I think it's important that I understand their value system, what their core values are. One thing I would add to the great conversation that we're having is that identifying who you are as an individual and what your core value is, it should be the guiding principle and the guiding light for what you contribute to the world, because those are the individuals that will begin to gravitate towards you. And for me, my core value is empathy. And I've recognized that quite some time ago, but I think now that we've been in this new world of this virtual experience, I've really begun to hone in on that value and recognizing that we're all experiencing so many different things, especially for those young people that are experiencing this in a different way, that are perhaps experiencing some trauma. We know a number of rates as it relates to domestic violence and child abuse. I mean, if we're just being frank here, has gone up. And so we, recognize that, are in spaces now where we're having to have conscientious conversations about how do we help to facilitate resources if we see that, if our match support specialists see that. So again, I think that the mentoring relationship has to go both ways, and it creates a leadership in both ways as well, whether you are top heavy with respect to being the leaders of the organization or cascading through the entire system, and recognizing that we all need one another and we can learn from one another.
Yeah, that's exactly, I think when we think about the things that, have increased and not all great, right? It's in particular for our children. And unfortunately, trust has also declined. There have been reports about trust across just different institutions declining, and that, I'm not an expert on Covey, but I know that trust is a big part of leadership and confidence. And so I know that we only have a few, maybe like 20 minutes or so left, but I know that we have more questions from the audience. Julian, I know you've already mentioned this, but the audience wants you to go over again those 7 things that you mentioned that must be in alignment.
Sure. So that is actually a screening methodology that recruiters use to interview on the front end, but it also serves as a check-in mechanism moving forward. The acronym is M-SLOMAC. M stands for motivation. Why did the candidate want to look for an opportunity in the first place? And are there any potential red flags that may line up in there? Motivation. Skills. What are the technical skills required to do the job? And does the individual candidate have those technical skills? Location, that has to do with where does the role need to be fulfilled, and can the individual commute back and forth on a regular basis to that opportunity? Is it remote? Is it too far out? Are they hit with rush hour traffic or whatnot? Because that can burn out a candidate, right? O stands for opportunity. What are the candidate's individual long-term goals? And does the organization offer a platform for them to achieve that, right? The second M stands for money. What are the compensation requirements for the position? And does the organization have the budget to fulfill that? Availability, that has to do with when is the need of the business taking place, and can the candidate start in accordance with that timeline? And then lastly is C, it's culture, right? If there's a Kung in food to hiring, Kung is like the science and food sort of the art. That's what this is. Are they a cultural fit with the organization? Do they fit in with the values, the soft skills with everybody else in the company, right? And what I've known is that every single hire that you make to an organization, it can either move the culture forward or backward. So that's M-SLOMAC, M-S-L-O-M-A-C.
Everyone is writing that down, including our panelists. So I know that Julian, you're I forget so many hats you wear, being a recruiter, and I know that Gwen, having that experience within management as well, I know that there's no way that we can put a pause on our life during the pandemic, and so I know that some of our individuals on this call have mentioned, perhaps, we know that there have been layoffs. We know that, there are some jobs that might not come back. And so what advice can, you share to professionals that were out there, thinking of potentially, maybe it was going to be their next big thing, or maybe within their own organization, or maybe, maybe outside, right? Maybe they were going to start looking externally. And so Gwen, I want you to address that, but then also maybe Julian can chime in.
Yeah, and I think, with looking at opportunities, every situation is unique. And sometimes, and especially during unpredictable times, it's very difficult to get all of the noise out of your head and sit down and take stock of yourself and where you feel you're at, where you feel you could be, and how you can get there. And I do believe now is a little bit of a point of time where you need to exercise caution, and you need to take really good understanding of where you are financially, what makes up your life, so that you don't put yourself in any harm's way any further than what might be dealt us down the road. I think that, a couple of characteristics I think that are important to develop as you look for new job opportunities, as you look for potential mentors. And these are some characteristics that I've seen through the United Way's Social Innovation Accelerator. Continue to be very approachable and coachable in any situation you're in, whether it's your current work situation, your volunteer situation, continue to be looking for potential next steps. Take your time and do your homework and be able to show evidence of your talent and your abilities in a genuine way. And I love what Jamila said about, taking stock of what she's about and what her value system is about. It's a tough exercise, but when you do it, it will put you in a position to take advantage of opportunities. I think now is a time also where you have to be mature enough to go out and have constructive conversations about your weaknesses and what you might be able to adjust or change to be able to take that next step if you look at a future career. And then, we're all tapped out of energy, but nothing beats having the energy for a situation and the enthusiasm for a situation in any environment. So I hope I answered your question, Prisma, but that's just some thinking about when you're looking at your next steps from a career standpoint. Great.
And Julian, anything else you'd like to add there?
So I heard it was more of a job search question, right? If somebody's looking for another opportunity, what's the best way to do it amidst the pandemic, especially now? I think right now, the most important thing you can be doing is to be aggressively growing your network of individuals who hire for your particular position, whether or not they have openings. Remember what I said, 27, 3, and 1, right? So find a list of 20 companies that you genuinely have an interest in. And then you start looking on LinkedIn, the titles of the supervisory roles for that. Let's say you're a software engineer. You look for the VP of software development, director of software engineering, manager of applications, right? And you reach out to all of them. And then you say, my name is so-and-so. I have X years of experience doing this. The biggest result that I have is this. I'd love to schedule a coffee with you, virtual coffee with you, even if you don't have an opening, just so I could share with you how I could support your organization moving forward. Line up as many of those conversations as possible, right? Because when somebody posts a job, there's a good chance hundreds of people are already applying to that position, and internal people are generally kind of favored for that, right? This is a way of sort of shortcutting the process. Do all of that low-hanging fruit stuff, right? And then do this. Because the chances are, if they're not hiring, there's no one clouding them in terms of their attention. This way, you're much more likely to get their attention, right? And to schedule those conversations. So I think it's that. Make a list of 20 companies. Find 3 decision makers for each of the role. Systematically reach out to all of them and schedule virtual coffees. Get to know them.
Thank you, Julian. I know that our time is almost to its end, and I know that that there are probably employees and just people in general, right? We have maybe a sense of uncertainty. We could be having fear, and change is hard. So I know that this pandemic has really increased and decreased and made so many changes in people's lives. And so just as a closing question for all of the panelists, I just wanted to go around and see what your number one piece of advice to mentors and leaders during this time would be. So you can don't all jump in at once, but if somebody wants to go first.
I can start, Prisma. I think the best advice someone has ever given me that I've implemented and started to really generate results is, as early on as you can, switch from a consuming mindset to a producing mindset. If you are somehow able to leverage your talents and abilities to meet the needs of others, that right there has a way of making space for you, right? When I talk a lot about this idea of stewardship, the discovery, deployment, and development of our talents and resources to be of service to others. There is this beautiful intersection of your natural strengths, your areas of interest, and value creation for others. Try to find that center for you, because that is your sweet spot.
Anyone else? Gwen, Jon, Jamila?
I think if you're not being recognized for opportunities, then you need to take action and you need to start your journey. And, I think in the corporate world, lots of individuals were identifying me at one point and then switching to the nonprofit world. It's more of a build your own mentoring program, do it yourself. And so, you know, you need to take the initiative to find the people in the programs. And Julian's got great advice. I think there is nothing better than connecting with people that can broaden your thinking to a higher value, and to really show you what is out there and the different types of choices that you can make and how you can build your skill set to get to that higher level. And, you know, Jon even mentioned it a little bit earlier on about, you know, reaching out to people that are can really see the world from a different way than you, and can shed some light on how you can excel. So, yep, this has been great, Prisma. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Gwen. Damila?
Yeah, sure. What I would add is simply that all of us have something to contribute to the world. That's number one. Don't discount your gifts just because you don't have a title. Title is not the determinant of leadership. It's character and ability. That's number two. And the final thing is, I think when you're seeking out mentorship relationships, that you create a space for a mutually beneficial relationship, and that recognizing that you also have something to give, that you're just not seeking, but that it is a give and take relationship. And someone may say, well, what do I have to give? I just started working. I want to seek out the CEO. What you have to give is the gift of you, being authentic, that all of us have something to contribute to the world. So never discount yourself when you're seeking out those individuals who you deem to have more experience than you, or you aspire to be. I would encourage you to aspire the role and not aspire to be them, because I almost guarantee you may do a better job than them. So thank you for allowing me to be a part of this panel. It's been an honor. Julian, Jon, and Gwen, it's been a pleasure. I look forward to staying connected with you. Thank you, Prisma and Social Venture Partners.
Thank you, Jamila. Jon, any thing to add?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, part of it goes back to what Jamila said, which is really knowing your brand, right? That's what we call it in the corporate world. And I think knowing your brand and being your brand is extremely important. And whether you want to call that values or you know, just how you represent yourself on a daily basis is probably a crucial aspect to your success in your career, because there's a format of consistency. People know who you are, they know what you're about, and they know where you're trying to go. And so that's, to me, is essential. I think seeking out higher level mentors to help you progress along the way and really challenge you and push you is also an essential function. And then I think as a leader, right, it's one, treating everybody fairly, and then two, humbling yourself to realize that you can learn from the people, right, that are working for you. So, you know, just a quick example is one thing I thought was really impressive to me is at Morgan Stanley, we would have a new managing director come in every like 8 months to our department, right? And they just did a rotation. And, you know, it's sort of just a cross-pollination exercise. But at the end of the day, what I found really just humbling, I guess, about those leaders is they took the time to sit down with you at your workplace and learn what you're doing, because they don't necessarily know what you're doing, right? They don't know the process. They don't know how that works. So having that curious mentality and learning from the people that are working for you, as well as learning from other people in your organization, is absolutely critical for your career and your success.
Thank you, Jon. With that, I think that we're wrapping up this panel. I wanted to mention that I know that I mentioned earlier that the trust factor was going down. It wasn't based on my assumption. It is actually the Eldman Barometer for Trust. So if you look that up, you know, it's been continuously going down. So not just in 2020, but it's been on a decline. And so I wanted to mention that that it wasn't just Prisma telling you that the trust is going down. And you know, here today we've learned so much about active mentorship and how it is vital to getting our employees and our organizations to achieve our goals as professionals, as people, and how to move forward. And I know that we owe it to our communities to continue to move forward and you know, not stopping all the work, the great work that we do in Dallas. And so I know that at SVP we've had to, the key word, right, pivot and during this time. And it's been because of our great leaders, and all of us have been leaders and not based on title. And so just to wrap up, I know that I've just learned that leadership doesn't mean gaining just followers. It means that we're making more leaders. And so I think that's something that SVP is looking to achieve. And, I wanted to close out by just saying that we want to continue to build these authentic relationships, but also encourage authentic listening, because what we've heard from everyone is that we all come from different experiences, and we're all able to provide something to our organizations. And so if you're out there and you feel like you can provide something to our social impact community here in Dallas, please, go online, svpdallas.org, and see if you can, maybe you want to join as a partner, or if you're an organization, we offer pro bono consulting. So definitely we can have more leaders coming to your organization. And so that is all very important work. And once again, I want to thank our sponsors, Something Good Consulting Group and Right Connector, for this opportunity to continue to share the great work that we're doing, and continue to build the capacity of our organizations. And also, if you're interested in sponsoring and getting involved in that way, please reach out as well. Of course, we have a great conference, which I know that Gwen and all of us can talk about for longer than we have. It's coming up here, and now a week long of events. Equity in Action, the next 100 years. I know that today we talked a little bit about racial, gender, economic differences within mentorship and leadership, but there we will go deep dive for sure in terms of like all the different aspects of social justice within our communities. And so please go to bigbangtx.com and you can buy a ticket there, or learn more about sponsorship opportunities. And of course, next week we will have another response topic, which is the people response. And in this particular topic, we'll explore more about political issues pressing our communities. And so you can join us. It's a Zoom webinar as well, and you can register on svpdallas.org. Once again, thank you to our panelists. I know we only have a few minutes, but it looks like we're all wrapped up. And thank you so much for your time, and we hope you have a great day.